tonight, dramatic and terrifying new pictures of a wildfire in Colorado now turning deadly. With new warnings, first responders are running out of resources, and a heat wave making things worse for firefighters in California. We're going to take you live out west with more on what's happening as we speak and what's next for the people forced out of their homes. Then the combative and controversial appearance by former President Trump at a conference for black journalists, questioning Vice President Kamala Harris's own racial identity and suggesting any running mate pick is basically irrelevant to voters. We're live with both candidates on the trail tonight. Plus, the new warnings from Iran after the killing of a Hamas leader in its capital, the Middle East on a knife's edge, and the questions about what happens from here. Then the marathon trial of young thug taking a new and pretty wild twist. More on the accusations of yet another secret meeting that has the defense calling for a mistrial. And in tonight's original, whether the weight loss drugs some people see as miracles could also come with a dangerous side effect. What doctors are now saying about eating disorders later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie. We'll have more on those wildfires out west in just a minute, but we'll begin tonight with former President Trump getting combative on stage today at a conference for black journalists that from the jump got super testy, super contentious, with Mr. Trump at one point attacking Vice President Harris's racial identity. Listen.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
You can hear the audience reacting there as we're set to see Mr. Trump back in Pennsylvania just about an hour from now as his team defends what he said at that panel. And those in Harris' world describing the new interview, the panel conference, as a disaster. She's getting ready to speak in Texas in a couple hours. But right now, her campaign is focused on next week's Real Deal ticket kickoff. That's when she's expected to announce a running mate and then hit up some battlegrounds. You see them here. Of course, this little box, unknown, that's the big question, right? Which face fills that box? Probably one of the 6 that you're about to see here. In the running for that job, getting vetted in the conversation, with several of them indicating that they really want it, putting out videos over the last 18 hours for them, pumping up their biographies, pumping up their accomplishments. We've got it covered tonight with Kelly O'Donnell posted up near the White House, but we start with Garrett Haake in Pennsylvania with former President Trump. So, Garrett, that conference started like an hour and change late. It ended a little bit early because the Trump camp says the former president wanted to get to Harrisburg, where you are. But what we saw after those very controversial comments was the Trump camp doing what the former president often does, not backing down and then essentially going after the media. 2 fronts here.
Yeah, I think that's right, Hallie. Look, I mean, this was combative and contentious, even by the Trump standard here, really going after the moderators and making some, frankly, fairly wild claims about Kamala Harris's racial identity. Now, Trump was in that room because he doesn't need to win black voters. He doesn't need to lose them by a particularly unspectacular margin. But his campaign believes that if he can peel off even a small percentage, particularly of black men, they can win in some of the places that have eluded them in the 2020 election, like Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee. They can do just well enough in those places that he can be the next president. The message that I think he meant to deliver is equally eyebrow-raising, but at least slightly more to his economic point overall about the importance of his immigration policies to African Americans nationwide. Listen to this comment, which also drew a lot of attention from that same speech.
Coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. You had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
A black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right.
Hallie, I talked to an African-American Trump voter in Harrisburg today who echoed that talking point to me as something that he's very concerned about, the idea that the flow of illegal immigrants at the border is something that could affect the economy, could adversely affect him and people like him. So that's the kind of thing the Trump campaign wants to get out there. Donald Trump, as you said, embraced his own remarks, basically said he thought he did great despite rude interviewers today. But the rest of the Republican Party is a little bit more concerned. Larry Hogan, for example, running for Senate in Maryland, was quick to jump to Twitter saying that basically going after someone's racial identity is the kind of thing that should be out of bounds. It's abhorrent. Obviously, he's not endorsing Donald Trump, and keeping some distance from him probably good for him in deep blue Maryland.
That's a good point. Garrett, stand by for a second. Kelly O'Donnell, let me go to you on this front and the way that the vice president's team is responding to this.
Well, they are certainly pointing out big themes that they think represent who Donald Trump actually is, saying that his appearance at the NABJ conference reflects the hostility that he has shown to black journalists, to black citizens, to the country in many other instances, and that he just revealed more of himself in this exchange. They found it insulting and rude, and they also certainly are very strongly saying that this was a tirade of the former president doing what he does. And of course, that was met with the Trump campaign further embracing what the former president had to say. And so in some ways, both campaigns are getting some mileage out of this. And certainly Donald Trump, at one point when Kamala Harris was running for attorney general in the state of California, he had donated to her, and yet he claimed to not know about her racial identity and her ethnic heritage, as if it can only be one thing. So many Americans come from multiple ethnic and racial and cultural backgrounds. That is what a melting pot tends to be. So the Harris campaign sees this as revealing Donald Trump in his temperament, in his real views, in his approach to dealing with others, including the black journalists on the stage, including black citizens, by talking about black jobs. Well, they would argue that Vice President of the United States is currently a black job. And so this is about highlighting the fact that they believe there is always, if not an obvious, an undercurrent of challenging her on her identity that they think will actually galvanize voters on the Democratic side and will help to create more energy. So they also, of course, would like to see a Trump debate with Vice President Harris, and she has talked about that. If you're going to say it to my face. That's right. Today's events could bring out some more of that.
You also saw Mr. Trump, Garrett, facing questions about his running mate, J.D. Vance, and those comments back from 2021 about so-called childless cat ladies inside the Democratic Party, et cetera. He's gotten a lot of backlash from that. And the former president said something interesting. He said, other than a little bit of a momentum bump in the few days when you announce a VP candidate, it doesn't actually matter on a ticket come November. Talk us through that dynamic here, because there's been a lot of attention on Vance, and not all of it has been super positive lately.
No, that's right, Hallie, and it caught my attention that when Donald Trump was asked if J.D. Vance would be ready on day one to take over as vice president or as president if he needed to, he kind of didn't really address the substantive point of the question, which is obviously really the one job that the vice president actually has. So not a strong embrace by Donald Trump of his vice president, whom, and we've talked about this before, I think he views as more like a spokesman for his own campaign than as a constitutional officer of his own kind here, out to do a very specific job for him. Vance, I think, so far has been mostly a net negative for the Trump campaign. Now, they understood that by picking someone who had not been thoroughly vetted by the national media, they'd have some bad news cycles coming out of the gate. I think the question for them is, in the next 97 days or so, does Vance shake off his past comments and turn into an effective messenger for Trump, as he's been in the past, and an effective attack dog against Kamala Harris, which is the VP's traditional role in a presidential campaign? He's out west now. He'll be at the border tomorrow, where he's hoping to highlight that issue as a negative for Kamala Harris. And I think it's just going to be a matter of time, Hallie, to be really honest with you, to see whether Vance is able to shake off these comments, most of which are several years old, and kind of turn the page, or if he's going to continue to get bogged down in defending things he said even before he was a senator.
Garrett Hake, live first in Harrisburg. Thank you. Kelly, let me go to you, because now Vice President Harris is going to pick her own running mate, right? She is looking at a slew of people, including, of course, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. A lot of talk about maybe Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro or Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. Let me ask you the question that you've heard 7 billion times in the past week, and that you're going to continue to hear until she announces, which is, where do things stand on the sweepstakes front?
Well, the process is moving forward, and we at least know when we will see them together, and that is next Tuesday, where Vice President Harris and her soon-to-be-named running mate will appear in Philadelphia and will do a series of stops together in critical battleground areas. Now, the selection process, this particular cycle, Democrats have a deeper bench than you might find in some years. That's always sort of an accident of timing, that there are governors who have strong records, that there is a senator who can provide some of the immigration and border policy backup and complement to Harris. So the work has been going on. The candidates in the sense of those being considered contenders, perhaps, have been using opportunities to do media and to make appearances and to do events as a bit of a dress rehearsal, an audition, if you will. They will all remain important surrogates all the way through to Election Day, but ultimately the one chosen will be a partner on perhaps the debate stage against J.D. Vance and certainly at the convention. So we expect to hear by Tuesday, perhaps a little in advance of that, but those who are really in the know are saying the least about it.
Well, and that is typically how it goes, Kelly. There's also an endorsement, a key endorsement that the Harris team is picking up tonight, right?
The United Auto Workers.
Yeah.
And that is certainly important. That's the kind of lane that Joe Biden occupied so much with his support for unions, and certainly she has a history of that as well. But this is a significant thing. We also know that many of the rank and file members of some of the big unions have been the kinds of voters that Donald Trump has tried to attract and has had some success with that. But the unions themselves and their organization and their ability to turn out votes can be very helpful, especially in battleground states like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, where their members reside. And so they talked about the fact that she has been supportive of unions and they want to be supportive of her.
Kelly O'Donnell, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Good to see you outside the White House there. Take you out west now with this, as we're coming on the air with a scary new warning. The odds stacked against rescuers trying to get a handle on what's now become a deadly wildfire in Colorado, with resources spread thin in the Boulder and Denver areas. You're looking at some of the images now that we're getting in. Hundreds of people forced to leave their homes, some of them in the dark. Multiple houses now destroyed, and officials sounding the alarm about what's next.
Everything's stacked against us. We got low resources. We got treacherous terrain. We got very flammable fuel. But we've got some of the best people in the business on it.
It's not just Colorado. Another new fire north of Fresno in California is threatening hundreds of buildings there. 2 entire counties evacuated. And the heat wave about to hit is making that massive park fire in California one of the biggest in that state's history, harder to fight, with officials describing near record levels of dryness fueling these huge and dangerous wildfires. NBC's Steve Patterson is out in it. He is joining us now. Let's start with Colorado, Steve, because there the situation has flared up in a big way, becoming deadly and very scary.
It has, Hallie's Quarry, Stone Canyon, Alexander Mountain, Current Creek. I'm not just saying random names. These are all the names of wildfires. It speaks to the fact of what every department really across the American West is facing right now. They're not just looking at one fire. It's not necessarily just 2 fires. It's 3 or 4 or 5 churning through thousands of acres of fresh, bone-dry fuel, because fire-prone conditions are perfect right now. And as the weather heats up, it's going to get even worse. We just heard from the Jefferson County sheriff there. He said, quote, "Everything is stacked against us." You can hear the desperation there because resources are spread so thin. It's not that these states aren't prepared or don't have the resources and don't have the manpower. It's you can only do so much when so much is on fire. And so that is really the threat that's not only in Colorado, obviously affecting the situation there. We heard about the death, 600 evacuated at one fire. There's going to be thousands more acres that are at threat as this fire churns through, as temperatures heat up. And again, there's only so much manpower. The governor just activated the National Guard, so that will help relieve some of this. But as the fire continues, they're going to need more. Hallie?
Tell me what's going on behind you, Steve, because in California, we know that you are bracing for basically a heat wave, the potential for triple-digit temperatures, which is going to be so brutal for these firefighters who are managing both the heat and also these near-record levels of dryness. It's just a lot of fuel.
And you have to take in consideration now, here on this fire, this is day 7, right? Firefighters have been fighting this for a week straight, some of them 24, 36, 48-hour shifts with no breaks, trying to push the flames back. The good thing is they've been successful. They've used the time wisely. 18% containment doesn't sound like much when you're talking about a fire literally the size of Los Angeles, but it does matter. It is significant. They've been able to do that because in this time, since about Friday or so, the weather has been good. It's been really cool in the morning, allowing firefighters to make progress. That cooler temperature base helps firefighters push the line forward. So now this fire is mostly burning in a wildland area sort of in the middle of the fire zone. They've contained it. It's away from homes and businesses. It's away from population centers. It's away from the places that officials fear. But all of that changes once again with another heat wave coming in. The conditions for a fire, right? It's really easy. Higher temperatures, low humidity, any sort of wind. All of that is in the forecast, so firefighters are doing all they can right now to try to shore this up, push it even further back before those hot temperatures arrive, and this could explode. Again, all it takes is one spark. Hallie?
Steve Patterson, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Overseas now, and a new warning from Iran's supreme leader tonight, adding to what's already a tinderbox in the Middle East, pledging to avenge the death of Hamas's top political official, with Iran and Hamas tonight blaming Israel for the attack that killed him in Tehran. He's one of Hamas's most senior leaders and a key figure in ceasefire negotiations. The Israeli prime minister addressing the world early today, but making no mention of the thing that the world is talking about, not saying whether Israel had any role in that assassination. Now, the Israelis are taking credit for another strike hours earlier that they say killed a top Hezbollah commander in Beirut. But the ramifications of all of this potentially profound, with both attacks raising concerns yet again about more conflict in the region. Matt Bradley is joining us now. So let's talk about this killing in Tehran of this top Hamas leader, the political leader, not the military leader, which is an important distinction, right? I think the question people have immediately is, okay, well, so what does this mean for the potential for ceasefire negotiations, for freeing those hostages that are still being held in Gaza?
Well, I mean, it really makes it a lot more complicated. And in fact, we already heard from the Prime Minister of Qatar, who's been one of the most important intermediaries, not just in these negotiations between Israel and Hamas, which the U.S. is involved in, but all sorts of negotiations have been going on for decades. They're really important diplomatically. His point over X, formerly known as Twitter, was that how can you continue these negotiations when Israel is assassinating the negotiators? It just doesn't make sense as far as he's concerned. So this is a really difficult situation because Hamas already had no trust in the Israelis, very little trust in the Americans, who they considered to be basically the patrons of the Israelis. And now with their top-level people who were involved in these negotiations who, as far as the Qataris are concerned, may have had some level of goodwill in trying to resolve this situation, or at least in bringing a measure of peace to the Gaza Strip. If the Israelis are continuing to target them, then it just becomes a non-starter. And I think we're going to start to see that in the next couple of days, where we're going to not see these negotiations. I mean, that's the real thing. This is not going to be news in the sense that nothing is going to happen. But, Hallie, we got to remember, these negotiations were basically done to begin with. I mean, they've been going on for about 10 months. They really got very little distance, despite the fact that Bill Burns, the CIA chief, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, and numerous other diplomats were shuttling back and forth to the region. The U.S. was pouring so much effort into this, and so far it's come to nothing. It might not have needed Israel and its assassinations' help.
In some ways, this appears to be, in the eyes of some experts who are far smarter on this than me, but the idea of a return to the Israeli strategy from the 70s, going after leaders of terror groups one by one, essentially. Can you talk to us about the sort of tactics here from Israel?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we've already started to see. It's a bit different. But what we saw back after those Olympics in Munich, and again, we're seeing the Olympics now, and there were real concerns, particularly among us here at NBC, that there could be a terror attack because of what's going on in the Middle East. This is an acute concern when it comes to any high-profile event in which the Israelis are participating. But now we're starting to see that same sense of vengeance that we saw after those Olympics in the early 1970s being enacted now. And in fact, the Shin Bet, according to Israeli media, and we haven't checked this out ourselves because, of course, it's very secretive. These Shin Bet has formed a unit called Nili, which is an acronym that actually borrows its name from a Jewish group of paramilitaries who were opposing Ottoman rule during World War I. They have now been tasked with going around the world and hunting down the perpetrators, much in the same way you saw in the 1970s. History repeating itself. Hallie?
Matt Bradley, live for us there in Beirut. Matt, we're going to, I know, talk with you again later on tonight. Appreciate it. You've got Boeing tonight out with some split-screen news today, naming its new CEO on the one hand, announcing record losses on the other hand. Now you've got industry veteran Robert Kelly Ortberg, who's set to replace the outgoing CEO, David Calhoun, next week, with Boeing hoping to stop the bleeding, so to speak, after reporting a loss of nearly $1.5 billion in the second quarter. Calhoun stepping down after a not-so-great year for Boeing, starting in January, of course, when the door blew off that Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 plane. And Boeing's Starliner spaceship is still docked to the space station with the astronauts unable to return to Earth after some engine thruster problems. They're just trying to get that stuff fixed for now. Tom Costello is joining us. Okay, new CEO.
Yeah.
Is this enough? Is this going to turn Boeing's fortunes around?
He's got a tough job. There's no doubt about it. Every single unit of Boeing has struggled, right? So commercial airlines with the MAX 8 and the MAX 9. 2 fatal MAX 8 crashes overseas. The MAX 9 door plug blowout. By the way, NTSB hearings next week on that. Look at the space division, as you suggested. The Starliner still docked to the space station. Don't say stuck, says NASA. Astronauts could, in an emergency, return home. But I got to say, you've been there 6 weeks and you can't get home? Really, for now? You call it what you want, but they can't get out of there right now. And we're still waiting for NASA and Boeing to give us any sort of a timeline for when they could return. And NASA is, Boeing is billions of dollars over budget on that division. And then, can I tell you, military also struggling within Boeing. They've got troubles across the board. The CEO, this new CEO, has a very big job ahead of him.
So what's first on the list?
First of all, he is moving the headquarters, moving back to Seattle from right across the river, right now in Arlington. They moved the headquarters here to Washington a number of years ago because they wanted to cater to the military. The Pentagon's right here. But by doing that, the argument is they took the eye off the ball, and the ball is, of course, commercial airlines. That's the bread and butter. And engineering, they lost focus on engineering, so the argument goes. He is, by the way, a veteran aerospace engineer, 35 years in the business. So he is bringing all of the headquarters operations, at least in relation to commercial aircraft, back to Seattle. Something else that's interesting, he's 64 years old. Boeing has a mandatory retirement age of 65. The board is waiving that.
Okay,
they've decided,
including for its top leaders.
We need this guy. He's the guy. He comes from Rockwell International, and we are going to waive that mandatory retirement age. So that's going to be the challenge, right? He's got to do a lot of work and regain the confidence of you, of me, and of airlines, which are their real customers.
Not to totally derail this, but can you go back to the space station situation thing for a second? I thought the whole thing was that they're there. They could get back if they wanted to, but they're giving themselves some more time to see if they can fix this engine thruster issue while they're up there.
Yeah.
Is that still the operative thinking?
That is still the thinking.
Okay.
You know, back 6 weeks ago...
Because you sounded skeptical,
Well,
Tom.
here's
More
the problem. 6 to 7 weeks ago, Boeing and NASA said, don't call them stuck.
Yeah.
Because in an emergency, they could come home, and they'll probably be coming home in a couple of weeks. Okay, they were supposed to be there for, what, 9, 10 days? They've been there 50-plus days. And we're still waiting for them to do a full, thorough analysis of all the thruster issues before they say, okay, it's safe to come back in that spaceship. At a certain point, you got to say, if they're not stuck, what are you calling it here? I mean, a delayed stay with a room with a view, but we're not stuck? I mean, come on. At a certain point, they got to get this spaceship back safely.
Hell of a view in that room, to be sure. But
That's right.
more,
And by the
on that
way,
to come, I'm sure.
still wearing other people's underwear.
Okay. Thank you, Tom Costello.
Okay.
We're going to move on to other news as well tonight, Tom. We love you, appreciate it. Still to come. We're moving on to Young Thug news, why this trial for him is getting even wilder by the day. The latest twist there. And a parent's worst nightmare. We're going to show you this, actually. This toddler trapped in a pipe some 10 feet underground. The good news, they rescued him. We'll show you how next. To a new twist now in Georgia's longest-running criminal trial. Defense attorneys for Young Thug saying they've learned of yet another secret meeting between prosecutors and the former judge in the case. Remember, that's after some dramatic scenes in court weeks ago when the defense found out about a different secret meeting the first time around. Moments that went viral. You're seeing some of it here as Young Thug's lawyer was ordered to spend weekends in jail for contempt. Now, the judge, originally assigned to the case, ended up being removed altogether. But now the defense team wants a mistrial, calling the case irrevocably tainted. Young Thug, real name Jeffrey Williams, is facing charges. He led an Atlanta-based criminal gang, essentially, and oversaw a conspiracy to commit murder, armed robbery, and drug dealing. Priya Sridhar is following this one for us. Okay, Priya, so what are the chances, based on your reporting, that the defense gets the mistrial it wants after revealing what they describe as this secret meeting between the judge who used to oversee this case and prosecutors?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the question that legal observers who have been absolutely captivated by this case are debating right now. What we know so far is Judge Paige Whitaker, the new judge who has sort of taken Judge Glanville's role in this case, she has denied all the motions that have been brought forward so far that she's gotten a chance to see any sort of mistrial. This one, however, seems to have the most meat to it because it seems to indicate a pattern here that the judge was having these secret meetings with prosecutors, and now defense attorneys are bringing up, hey, listen, the first time that first secret meeting that was conducted on June 10th was brought up, we talked about this at length. Why was it never brought up in those discussions that there was now another secret meeting that happened on June 7th? So essentially what defense attorneys are trying to say right now is that everything that Judge Glanville ruled on and all the decisions he made in the 19 months prior to him being recused from this case should be called into question. And not just that, when the first secret meeting was revealed by the defense attorney, Brian Steele, that the case should have been put on pause at that point, and that Judge Glanville actually decided not to do that, not to wait for the other judge to come in and decide whether or not he was in fact going to be recused, but he continued to allow the jury to listen to witness testimony for 4 days. So now defense attorneys are saying, listen, that's tainted testimony. So, you know, there's a really high bar when it comes to a judge declaring a mistrial here, but as you mentioned, this has been absolutely an unprecedented case, so anything is really possible here, Hallie.
Did the installation of this new judge slow down the trial more? Like, in other words, what's the timeline here, as this is already Georgia's longest-running criminal trial?
Yeah, I think that's another question that everybody's kind of watching. She seemed to indicate, at least so far this week, when the trial has picked back up, that she wants to move very quickly. She says she's hoping it's not going to take another 7 months, but she's prepared if it does. The prosecutors have another 105 witnesses that they want to call to the stand, but Judge Whitaker has moved rather swiftly this week, making two big decisions. One was to not allow Young Thug to actually bond out of jail. His defense attorneys were trying to argue that, listen, he's been behind bars since May of 2022, and a lot of the delays and pauses in this case had nothing to do with him. He's not a flight risk. He's not a risk to the community. But Judge Whitaker actually denied that request to bond out. She also denied the prosecution's request to put a gag order on the defense attorneys and not allow them to speak publicly or to the media about this case. So if you look at just those two decisions, which she moved rather swiftly on, everyone's hoping that perhaps this case can be wrapped up kind of quickly. But as you mentioned, it's already set records for being the longest trial in Georgia's history, Hallie.
Priya Sridhar, live for us there in Georgia. Thank you very much. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, rescuers in India are looking for people after those landslides we've told you about that have now killed more than 150, according to police. Look at all the mud there. You've got people still getting pulled out, even now, by crews. The rain that you're seeing falling is making the whole thing harder. Officials say more than 5,500 people have been rescued so far. Number 2, 2 former Penn State students pleading guilty to misdemeanor hazing after a pledge of their fraternity died. The 2 former students were the president and vice president of the chapter back in 2017 when that pledge apparently drank a lot of alcohol, fell, and then died. They'll be sentenced in October. Their lawyers did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Number 3, a big boar's head recall is now expanding to include 7 million more pounds of deli meat and some other food over concerns about listeria. It's deadly. 2 people have died. More than 30 people across several states have now gotten sick, according to officials. Number 4, crews rescuing a toddler in Kansas who got trapped in a pipe. He was apparently walking around the yard with his mom when he fell and ended up 10 feet underground, essentially. Rescuers, there he is. He's doing okay. They lifted him out with a rod and a rope. Fortunately, that little boy was just fine. Number 5, a man in Missouri is out of prison now after 34 years after a judge overturned his murder conviction earlier this month. This is Christopher Dunn here, walking out for the first time in decades as a free man, getting released. He has said he was not involved in the killing of a 15-year-old back in 1990. That judge who overturned the conviction agreed. The state's attorney general tried to keep him behind bars. So tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight, it's those popular weight loss drugs we've been covering, like Ozempic and Mounjaro, with studies showing these revolutionary medications can have dramatic benefits. But doctors are also reporting some patients developing eating disorders or seeing them get worse when using these drugs. Dr. Akshay Syal has our story.
Cynthia Landau has always had a complicated relationship with food. Fighting obesity since she was a kid, she was eventually diagnosed with binge eating disorder.
For me, it was obsessing about my next meal, obsessing about when my next snack is going to be. I was always thinking about food. It was like just continuous thoughts about it.
Struggling to lose weight, her doctor recommended a GLP-1 drug, part of a new class of medications used for weight loss, now soaring in popularity after being touted by celebrities like Oprah.
The superstar admitting she uses a weight loss medication.
But what happened next shocked Cynthia.
Completely changed the way I looked at food, how I felt, how I was thinking, like completely. Like for the binge eating, it like almost completely took it away.
She began skipping meals, eating as little as 500 calories a day with dangerous consequences.
I did experience like my blood sugar levels drop because I wasn't eating enough and I wasn't eating frequently enough. First time that I fainted, I was on the subway. It became more important to maintain that weight loss and to continue losing weight over fueling my body.
Doctors say Cynthia is part of an emerging trend of patients who have developed eating disorders or seen them worsen since starting the medications, which include drugs like Wegovy or Zepbound.
Particularly in the last 6 months, we've just seen an increase of new onset eating disorders or worsening of current eating disorders based off of the use of these drugs.
Dr. Thomas Hildebrandt, chief of the Eating and Weight Disorders program at Mount Sinai School of Medicine, says he's seen patients develop eating disorders just a few months after starting the drugs.
Their relationship with food then became more obsessive. Their relationship with their weight and their body also became obsessive. You start to turn into someone not like yourself.
When taking GLP-1 weight loss drugs, it's normal to have less of an appetite. This leads patients to eat less and ultimately leads to weight loss. But sometimes it can go too far.
So how do you know if patients eating less is part of a normal reaction to a drug or it crosses a line into an eating disorder?
I think there are a couple of signs. One, if you're unable to eat enough to actually maintain your nutrition. The other kinds of symptoms that we see a preoccupation with the number on the scale, the progress I'm making in weight loss that doesn't ever really stop.
Major eating disorder organizations are now calling for doctors to screen people for conditions such as anorexia or bulimia before prescribing these drugs. In a statement, Wegovy's maker Novo Nordisk said their medications should only be taken as prescribed and trust that healthcare providers are evaluating a patient's individual needs. And Zepbound maker Eli Lilly said they actively engage in monitoring, evaluating, and reporting safety information. And if somebody is experiencing any side effects, they encourage them to speak with their healthcare provider. Cynthia is now working closely with a psychologist who has helped her get back to a healthy diet and weight. She's still taking the drug to maintain her weight, but doesn't use it as often.
I wish I would have been better prepared for the side effects that my mental health had, but I appreciated the medication has helped me reach my weight loss goals. Ultimately, I'm grateful.
Dr. Hildebrandt said that part of the problem is the lack of education and screening by doctors to find those who might be at risk of an eating disorder. For those on these drugs or looking to start them and worried you might be at risk, he recommends you talk to a mental health professional. Hallie?
Dr. Akshay Sayal, thank you very much. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, police in Florida say a 25-year-old man's now facing multiple charges after 4 people were killed in a house fire. Police say he lived on the property and admitted to starting the fire. They're still trying to figure out why. Out of our Midwest Bureau, an historic power plant in Ohio collapsing today after a controlled implosion. Look at this. Roads were closed. People were told to stay inside, but you can see the sparks and smoke coming from the nearly 100-year-old building. There it is, the big cloud of dust coming up. Officials say the area is now safe. Also out of our Midwest Bureau, a parrot reuniting with its owner in Michigan after about 24 hours on the loose. Hot, fresh parrot news for you with Leo, who escaped his home, settling into some trees at Northern Michigan University. An arborist then came to the rescue, offering Leo the most tempting snack possible if you're a parrot, a PB&J. The bird ate half of it, bit the guy on the hand, and then took off, saying, "Who's a good boy?" This is real. A few hours later, Leo was spotted again in some other trees. His owner came and got him down safely. Leo is a very good boy, apparently. Taking you to Paris now. And Team USA's swimming superstar Katie Ledecky making history with her win in the 1500, setting a new Olympic record. She crushed. She dominated. So here she is. And if you're like, wait, I don't see swimmers in the other lanes around her, that's because they were so far back. She looked like she was swimming by herself at some points. This is her 8th gold, tying a record for U.S. women. And in the water as well, over in the Seine, the triathlon. Those triathletes finally swimming after the water was declared safe. Guess who's live in Paris for us? Who else would it be? Our boy, Keir Simmons. There is a lot of swimming talk tonight, Keir. Not yours, but
Yes,
Katie
there
Ledecky's.
is.
She's amazing.
Yes.
And what's interesting is even, at 27 years old, very young for, like, humans. On the older end for Olympic swimmers, she's killing it.
On the older end. Oh, the older end. I think someone wrote that
That's not
to...
me. I said she was young for humans.
Who wrote that? Did someone
like,
write that to humiliate me? Are we starting this straight? Right out the gate. 27. I mean, yeah, but they're 27, and that is, you're right, that is older for an Olympian. And also, by the way, just try swimming one lap of a pool.
No thanks.
Freestyle.
Not me, babe.
And see, I tell you, right? And that's 15 minutes. I mean, it's like it's lung crushing. It's muscle depleting. It is unbelievable to see her. I thought at one stage that Katie Ledecky might start lapping the other competitors. I mean, she was so far ahead. It was ridiculous. So, yeah, I mean, an amazing moment for her. And I think we have a graphic. She is close to being the most medals against other Team USA women. I think we have that graphic. So, that is going to be quite an achievement. And okay, she's 27, but she's really just getting started. Simone Biles and the women gymnasts call themselves the Golden Girls. So, yeah, you're right. You're right to make the reference in terms of how amazing it is at this point in their careers. They call themselves something else as well, but we can't say it.
We can.
On air.
They said their other team name, you're talking about the USA women's gymnastics team, they said their other team name was F Around and Find Out. I didn't say what the F stands for, but that's what they said until Simone Biles came out and said Golden Girls. We can say it.
You went there. Okay.
It's streaming here. We can say it.
I'm not saying it.
All right, on the Seine front, we've been talking about the Seine a bunch, right? Because
I know
they were
what
going to
happens.
swim.
You see I know what happens. You see that moment ends up on Twitter, and then I get a call from manager. It's a thing.
Let's talk about one of our favorite topics, which is the Seine River, which you took a dip in one of the tributaries. It is finally opening back up as of today. So we saw the triathletes actually swimming in it. Did you get any vibes that they were nervous at all about it? Or this is kind of par for the course for these athletes who do swim in open water. That's part of the competition, as you've explained on the show.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think they saw me swim and felt kind of embarrassed and better get on with it. Overnight they tested the water, the bacteria, despite there were thunderstorms here overnight too. Despite that, the water level, the bacteria levels were low enough, and there they are swimming. And swimming under the Alexander III Bridge and looking exhausted at moments there. But what an amazing place to see them, what a historic place. You look back at those black and white pictures of Olympics past. Yeah. Those pictures we will look at in 100 years' time and say, wow, look at that, how about that?
Incredible.
So I'm so glad that happened that way. And a gold medal for Paris, which, of course, has spent $1.5 billion. So, they've invested a little bit.
Your daily question of the evening where you are. What's your favorite moment today? What's the thing you did that you love the most today? What's your rose?
Good. Yeah, you prepared me yesterday, and I didn't prepare all day.
24 hours to think
this.
about this.
I know.
All right. Well,
I think Ledecky. Honestly, I really do. I think Ledecky. Okay. We did see, by the way, we did see South Sudan in the basketball against Team USA, and they did lose. But it's pretty incredible to see a group of refugees, none of whom actually live in the country, go toe-to-toe with Team USA in the basketball. LeBron James. How about that?
No, that's another great moment. Keir Simmons, I'm just telling you now, we're going to talk every day, and every day I'm going to ask you that question. So just, we'll rose and thorn it out. It'll be good. Keir Simmons, appreciate you. You're my rose of the day. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it.
Oh, bless you.
Let's take you to China, where some of the Olympic swimmers there competing for that country say they're not really thrilled with how they've been treated. They're saying they're getting tested more than any of the other athletes, all stemming from this doping controversy going back to the games from 2020 that were played in 2021, where 23 Chinese swimmers tested positive. One of those swimmers, you see there, Zhang Yufi, competing in the 200-meter fly today, coming first place in her heat. But this whole thing is really adding to some of the tensions between the U.S. and China. You've got this group of U.S. lawmakers furious over how that 2021 case was handled. So mad that they've introduced a bill that could cut funding for the global sports anti-doping system unless there are some changes. World anti-doping officials say they're being unfairly caught in the middle of what they describe as geopolitical tensions between superpowers. Janice Mackey-Freyer joins us now from Beijing. And this is part of what is so interesting about the Olympics, Janice. It is fun. It is this incredible competition showcasing the world's greatest athletes. But there are also geopolitical dynamics at play. And we're seeing that here with this Chinese doping scandal. Talk us through it.
Hallie, you're exactly right. This cloud of suspicion over Chinese swimmers is the doping scandal of this Games because it's exposing what appears to be a chronic lack of faith that many U.S. athletes have in the system that's supposed to ensure clean and fair competition. And then you have Chinese swimmers like Zhang Yufei, who are saying they're being unfairly treated, that they're being psychologically impacted, that Chinese swimmers are being bypassed in the congratulations during medal ceremonies by other athletes, that it's disrupting the spirit of the Games. And they are being tested more than other athletes, Hallie. World Aquatics officials confirm that on average, since the 1st of January, Chinese swimmers have been tested 21 times by various anti-doping organizations. You compare that with American swimmers at 6 times on average and Australian swimmers at 4 times. But you also have U.S. anti-doping authorities and U.S. athletes livid about what's happening. Michael Phelps testified recently to a congressional committee. Here's what he had to say.
I think if we continue to let this slide any farther, the Olympic Games might not even be there.
And then you have Allison Schmidt, who was also testifying to that committee. She was one of the swimmers who lost out on gold in Tokyo to some of the Chinese swimmers who are now caught up in this scandal. Hallie.
What about any response from Chinese leaders on this, from Olympics officials on this? Because, as you know, it is really sort of roiling this community.
Well, we submitted some questions to China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They told us, quote, Chinese swimmers are clean and have never feared testing. They also say the allegation, quote, smears and attacks China and international anti-doping institutions and interferes with the global anti-doping governance system. China strongly condemns this. This is all over Chinese social media, Hallie. This is a huge topic. People saying that Chinese athletes just aren't performing as well at this Olympic Games because of all of the pressure. They're using comments like being targeted, that it's discrimination, that it's psychological and physical torment.
Janice Mackey-Freyer, we're glad to have you there covering all of it for us. I'm sure we'll be talking again before the end of these games. Thank you. Coming up here on the show, some stunning new claims about the way Israel is treating Palestinians in their custody. What one former detainee is telling NBC News in a new exclusive interview. Tonight, a report out from the UN is making new claims about the way Israel, they say, treats its Palestinian detainees. This report from the UN's Human Rights Office, based on interviews with former detainees, describes allegations of severe torture, including reports of being held in cage-like facilities, waterboarding, sleep, food, and water deprivation, electric shocks, setting dogs on prisoners, getting stripped naked, and some other forms of mistreatment. The Israeli military, responding to this report, said abuse of detainees is illegal and against military orders, and that investigations are launched into all detainee deaths in custody. Now, in a new NBC News exclusive, a former Palestinian detainee is detailing their account in line with the UN's findings. NBC's Hallie Garani has the story, and we want to warn you, some of what you're going to hear is disturbing.
On July 9th, Muazzez Obayat walked out of an Israeli prison a broken man. In fact, he could barely walk at all. His legs shattered, his right arm fractured, confused and emaciated. Once a fit 200-pound amateur bodybuilder, the 39-year-old father of 5 tells us he was relentlessly tortured in Naqab prison in the Negev desert. They stripped me and began to beat me while I was naked, he told me in an exclusive interview from his home in Bethlehem in the West Bank. They even hit me on the genital organs, he said. And the people with you as well, I ask? Yes, they used to beat all the prisoners. And even when they handcuffed us, they used to make us sit on the ground like animals, he says. Israeli intelligence services Shin Bet did not respond to our request to respond to Obayat's account. But it is this type of alleged abuse by guards at another desert prison that led far-right Israeli protesters to break into the Sededi Temam detention camp Monday. Not to protest suspected prisoner abuse, but to try to stop the Israeli police from arresting and questioning 9 guards suspected of torturing detainees. They were accompanied by several far-right members of the Israeli parliament, screaming death to terrorists. Since the October 7th attacks, NBC News has interviewed former detainees both in Gaza and the West Bank, who give largely similar accounts of severe mistreatment in detention. Like this group of prisoners released July 25th, some unable to walk, others suffering from amnesia and broken bones, according to their relatives. The IDF has told NBC News they treat detainees according to international law. Human rights groups like HRW dispute that and say the arrests and abuses have increased since October 7th.
Under international humanitarian law, the ICRC, the Red Cross, has the main mandate to monitor detention facilities, and there has been absolutely no visits. So there's complete isolation and no awareness to what's exactly happening in these detention conditions, except when whistleblowers speak to journalists, speak to media, and are able to really give us a sense of what's going on.
Muazzaz Obayat told us Israeli forces called him a killer, something he denies. He said he was interrogated only once in 9 months. No charges were ever filed. Obayat was held under so-called administrative detention, where Palestinian prisoners can be detained without charge and without any evidence against them. Your family didn't know your whereabouts at the time. What was happening to you, I asked? I was isolated from the world, he responded. Negev prison is the worst torture prison known in history. We, the prisoners, named it Guantanamo. His 5th child, a son, was born while he was held in captivity. Obayat says he now carries the prison within him, and that even though he's home, he's not entirely free. Hala Gorani, NBC News, Bethlehem.
When we come back, it is possible that you or somebody you know uses StubHub for concert tickets. We'll tell you why it's now getting sued for the way it does business. StubHub tonight, now at the center of a new lawsuit that accuses the company of deceptive pricing and hidden fees. You know StubHub. You probably used them to buy concert tickets or sports tickets. Maybe you've sold tickets on there. Well, this lawsuit filed by the D.C. Attorney General now accuses the company of something called drip pricing, meaning posting like a price that's not complete, adding a bunch of fees during this long checkout process, using that little countdown clock to make it all feel really urgent. And ultimately, they say, boosting profits at the expense of customers by the tune of something like $118 million in hidden fees since 2015, according to the lawsuit. In a statement, StubHub's responding, saying they're committed to creating a transparent, secure, and competitive marketplace to benefit consumers, adding that their user experience is consistent with the law and with competitors' practices. Danny Savalos is joining us now. So, Danny, the lawsuit lays out this example. We're showing it here. 2 tickets listed at $178 each. By the time the person gets to the screen where they actually pay, they're hit with $141 in fees, which boosts the ticket price, obviously, by quite a bit. What does the lawsuit say about how StubHub, the accusation goes, tricks customers into paying this stuff?
Well, the complaint itself introduces us to the term drip pricing, but it also uses a term we're very familiar with, the bait and the switch. And they put those 2 words in bold. And everyone's familiar with that practice. And that's exactly what the plaintiffs in this case are alleging, that StubHub does a bait and switch. They advertise one price. By the time you get to the end and it's time to buy, you are now at another price. And they're taking advantage of what not only D.C. has, but many states have, which is very broadly drafted consumer protection laws. Some of these broadly prohibit any unfair or deceptive trade practice. That's a very big tent. So a creative attorney general or a creative private plaintiff can bring suit, and if their theory fits, then the company might be on the hook under these very permissive statutes.
This is the latest in a string of lawsuits against ticketing companies, and it's not even the first lawsuit this year for StubHub, right?
Yes, but StubHub's also, and some of these companies have been sued for antitrust. That's a lot different. That's about monopolistic practices.
Got it.
That's about cartel-type behavior, creating an artificial demand that doesn't exist because of monopolistic practices. This is a little different. This is like deceptive advertising, where they're telling us one price and giving us another at the end. So different theories, but still very much, you are correct. These companies are very much under attack lately.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now. Tonight, dramatic and terrifying new pictures of a wildfire in Colorado now turning deadly. With some warnings, first responders are running out of resources. You see the line of fire here, and a heat wave making things worse for firefighters in California. We're going to take you live out west with what's happening as we speak and what's next for the people forced out of their homes. Then, the combative and controversial appearance by former President Trump at a conference for black journalists, questioning Vice President Kamala Harris's own racial identity. We're live with both candidates on the campaign trail tonight. Then, in just the last couple of minutes, a group of men accused of plotting the 9/11 terror attacks now agreeing to plead guilty. We've got our Pentagon correspondent to explain how we got here nearly 23 years later. Plus, the new warning from Iran after the killing of a Hamas leader in its capital. The Middle East on a knife's edge, and the questions about what happens from here. Plus, the marathon trial of a young thug taking a new and wild twist. More on the accusations of yet another secret meeting that has the defense calling for a mistrial later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie. We're going to start with breaking news just into us in literally the last couple of minutes. The Pentagon announcing that 3 men accused of plotting the 9/11 terror attack here in the United States have reached plea agreements in the military commissions process. I want to bring in our Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Cubie, who's covering this for us. Courtney, what do we know and what has happened?
So it's three men who are accused of plotting the 9/11 attacks, as you said, Hallie. It's they aren't maybe names that all of our viewers would be familiar with, but Mustafa al-Hassawi, Walid bin Attash, and then Khaled Sheikh Mohammed, KSM as he's known. Our viewers may be a little bit more familiar with him because he's one of the cases that got a lot more attention in the days after. You can see his picture there on screen, in the days after he was arrested in Pakistan. So all 3 men, as you said, Hallie, have been held at Gitmo for more than 20 years. And during a large portion of that time, for years now, their attorneys have been working with the military commission process to try to come to some sort of a plea agreement. What we just learned only moments ago is they have reached that. This is the military commissions process. It's very different than a normal court or a regular court, as you and I might know in the civilian world. Basically, their attorneys and the defendants themselves will sit down with what's called a convening authority. This individual is sort of like a court administrator with some of the powers of a judge. Through many, many months, if not years, they have been discussing these possible pleas, and now they have come to one. We don't know the details, though, Hallie. Now, generally, because all 3 men were charged with crimes that would come with the death penalty, generally in a plea agreement like this, they would come to some sort of a deal to plead guilty to charges that would be just less than that would yield just less than the possibility of death penalty. That's what we believe happened here. Now, all 3 are expected to appear in court at Guantanamo Bay as early as next week, but we don't expect any sentencing to be until sometime next year. So we still won't know for some time exactly, frankly, what this means as far as the next steps for these 3 men.
Well, so that was going to be my question, right, is what does the timeline look like from here? And it sounds like from what you're saying, the timeline is fairly extended, at least at this point.
It is, and this is somewhat common in the military commissions process, where you have this lag time between when an individual pleads guilty and they're actually sentenced here. In fact, frankly, sometimes it can take even longer than a year for that to happen, Hallie.
That's interesting. Courtney Kube, thank you so much for bringing us that developing news now tonight from the Pentagon. Appreciate it. More to follow on that for sure. We've also got more to follow out west, where the odds seem to be stacked against rescuers trying to get a handle on what's now become a deadly wildfire in Colorado. With resources spread thin in the Boulder and Denver areas, hundreds of people forced to leave their homes in the dark. Look at this. Multiple houses now destroyed, and officials sounding the alarm about what's next.
Everything's stacked against us. We got low resources. We got treacherous terrain. We got very flammable fuel. But we've got some of the best people in the business on it.
It's not just Colorado. There's another new fire north of Fresno in California, threatening hundreds of buildings there. 2 entire counties evacuated. Look at this. The heat wave that's about to hit is making that massive park fire, already one of the biggest in state history, even harder to fight, with officials describing near record levels of dryness fueling these huge and dangerous, look at those flames, dangerous fires. NBC's Steve Patterson is out there in it. He is joining us now. Steve, talk us through what's happening in Colorado, where that fire has turned deadly, one of them, I should say, as well as California, where it is an extended stretch of fighting. And I think I can hear chainsaws behind you, too.
You can, yeah. You'd be able to see, if we were able to spin the camera around, crews are chopping down trees in a forest that has been completely gutted. Every just about wooded area in this area looks like it's been turned to ash, and there's destruction all around me. This is just one of the few parts of the now massive park fire, 5th largest fire in California history. It may get even larger by the time this is all said and done. This fire has been burning for now a week straight. Firefighters are spread thin, as they are really across the entire region. At least 89 major fires. Those are just the big ones that are burning across the American West, sending smoke all the way to the American East. In Colorado, it is particularly dangerous because several fires have just popped up, a few of them overnight. There is a network of fires, all of them maybe about 8 miles apart or so, between the borders of certain fires. They have turned deadly, as you said, and the resources are the problem because it's just spread out not only across the entire state. There's 600 firefighters from Colorado in other states trying to help other agencies. So this is a problem really across the West. It's only going to get worse if this hot weather hits us in the next few days, as it's expected to.
Yeah.
Hallie?
Steve Patterson, live for us there in Cohasset. Steve, thank you. To politics now, and former President Trump getting combative on stage today at a conference for black journalists that from the jump got really testy and really contentious, with Mr. Trump at one point attacking Vice President Harris's racial identity. Listen.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
Mr. Trump is rallying in Pennsylvania right now, about to at least, as his team defends what he said at that panel. And those in Harris' world, close to the vice president, describing Mr. Trump's interview as a disaster. She's getting ready to speak in Texas just less than an hour from now. But right now, her campaign is focused on next week's Real Deal ticket kickoff, when she's expected to announce a running mate and then hit up some battlegrounds. You see those battlegrounds there. The question is, who will she be traveling with? That mysterious shadow you saw will be filled in by one of these faces, in all likelihood, running for the job of being Kamala Harris's VP. And a bunch of them are suggesting they're down for the competition here. Look at this. They've got these new videos out, these four posting in just the last 18 hours, their bios, their accomplishments, etc. We've got it covered tonight with Kelly O'Donnell posted up near the White House on the heels of a big endorsement for the vice president. But let's start with Garrett Haake in Pennsylvania with Mr. Trump. We saw the crowd doing the wave behind you. Presumably he'll be on stage soon. He's getting a lot of backlash, presumably not from people in that room, but from other areas, some other corners of the political spectrum, if you will, as he's dug in on his online account to what he said about Kamala Harris's racial identity.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. Look, I think it's fairly safe to say this was not the message that Donald Trump was hoping to convey at that conference here today. We know that he's been targeting a small subset of black voters in this country, specifically black men, where he thinks he can do better than his single-digit performance from 2020, and that it could make a substantive difference. He wanted to be talking about the economy and try to peel off voters in that way. I want to play the message that I think his campaign hoped would be the salient point from this event, which raises its own questions, and then talk about the response to the one he ultimately did deliver. Here's what I think Trump's campaign hoped would be the big takeaway from today.
Coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. You had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
A black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right. As questionable and potentially problematic as the phrase black job is, that's the economic message that Donald Trump thought would be helpful. What wasn't helpful tonight was his discursion into identity politics. I don't know a single Republican thinks is a good strategy to expand the tent, and many think is a terrible strategy and one they have to distance themselves from. See Larry Hogan running in what could be one of the most competitive Senate races in the country here in Maryland tonight, and neighboring Maryland from where I am right now. So this is going to be another major cleanup for Trump, on which he's digging in, defending the comments on social media, and I expect in a short time defending them here on stage as well.
We'll see what he says about that. Garrett Hick, I want to go to Kelly O'Donnell. Garrett, I'm asking you to stand by because, Kelly, we're going to see the vice president speaking here shortly. Is the expectation that she may address this moment that Garrett just laid out?
From talking to aides, they do expect that she will address it, and it plays right into the kind of campaign rhetoric we've been hearing from her of late, where she has said, if you want to say something about me, Donald Trump, say it to my face, with an invitation for debate. But her campaign has, of course, already responded with a statement that goes after the tone, the language, and the style that Donald Trump displayed, saying it's really part of the tirade of chaos that voters are accustomed to. It's simply a taste of the chaos and division that has been the hallmark of Trump's MAGA rallies in this entire campaign, they write. It's also exactly what the American people will see from across the debate stage as Vice President Harris offers a vision of opportunity and freedom for all Americans. So they're knitting together a couple of key points. They want to debate, and they want to remind voters that chaos, as they describe it, comes with Donald Trump, and that would be what you would get again if voters return him to the White House. So expect them to try to make use of what former President Trump said and the way that he said it and the words that he chose and the emphasis that he placed as they go forward in the campaign.
Okay, well, I have both of you. Let me talk a little bit about Veep stakes, the one that was and the one that will be. And Garrett, I'll go to you on this with Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who has had, as you have described it here on this show, even a pretty rocky start to his time as a Republican, of course, vice presidential nominee. There have been some criticisms of his 2021 comments on quote-unquote childless cat ladies. He's had to defend that repeatedly. And what's interesting is our team on Capitol Hill talking with his fellow senators on the Republican side of the aisle about this. Listen to what Josh Hawley said. By the way, no Trump critic, right? No Trump Vance critic typically about this moment. Watch.
I mean, some people don't want to have kids.
Yeah,
and I
fair
guess
enough.
Should Republicans be talking about women who don't want children in the way that J.D. Vance did?
No.
A simple answer there from Senator Hawley, but also he just simply said no, Garrett, but also I think a telling one. Talk to me about how you see that fitting into this bigger picture.
Yeah, look, Josh Hawley was J.D. Vance before J.D. Vance was J.D. Vance, trying to do the populist economic spin on conservatism, hugging Donald Trump and trying to kind of put intellectual framework around the MAGA movement. So that response from him is certainly notable here. And look, you know, there's not a lot that you can really ask a VP to do except not be a distraction to the ticket. I think that's what J.D. Vance has been for the Trump campaign thus far. The core of the MAGA base still likes him. That's still his most important job, is to make sure those folks, particularly young men, turn out for Donald Trump. And the Trump campaign is hopeful that all of this, which mostly has to deal with comments he has made in years past, will kind of get worked through the media system and the storyline will move on to something else. But for now, what Donald Trump is having to be asked to explain what J.D. Vance meant in his own interviews, that's a net negative and certainly not the kind of ground that the Trump campaign hopes to be fighting the next 97 days or so of this election.
Garrett Haig live for us in Battleground, Pennsylvania. Garrett, I'm going to let you go soak in the pre-speech soundtrack, if you will. Thank you very much. Kelly, so your turn now on the whole VP of it all, right? Because we talked about some of those videos. We're talking about now this critical endorsement that the Harris X, or the Harris TBD ticket, is getting now from the United Auto Workers, a key union piece of the coalition that the Democrats are hoping to build here. Talk us through where things stand at the moment. We know that there is an end to the Veep stakes. That end will presumably be Tuesday, 6 days from now.
And that is because the campaign is previewing that Vice President Harris and her choice for running mate will appear together on Tuesday in Philadelphia and then have several campaign events together in key battleground places, all of the states that really, really matter. And so they are talking about that. So that gives us a hard bookend for this search. At the same time, we expect that she will use the days between now and then to finalize and refine her selection. We already know who some of the key names are, and they have gone through a vetting process, and that does include things like looking at comments that they've made. As Garrett was talking about J.D. Vance's comments from 2 or 3 years ago. Well, that's during the time Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been in the White House, so it's not like reaching back 20 years. And they'll look for those sorts of things. If you're looking at governors, if you're looking at Senator Mark Kelly, if you're looking at a cabinet secretary like Pete Buttigieg, they have been through some elections, and that can produce some of the vetting that takes place. It does pop to a different level when you're talking national politics. You can win statewide and not have the level of scrutiny over your finances, your personal life, your background, and everything you've ever said publicly like you do at the national level. So some of that is certainly being poured over now to try to refine the choices to give Kamala Harris a pick that she can feel comfortable about without surprises. But we'll see how that goes.
We sure will. Cal, thanks. You've been just crushing it on the reporting front, as always. We're glad to have you. It's good to see you there on the North Lawn. Let's take you overseas now. And this new warning from Iran's supreme leader tonight, adding to what's already a tinderbox in the Middle East. The supreme leader pledging to avenge the death of Hamas's top political official. You've got Iran and Hamas tonight blaming Israel for the attack that killed that official in Tehran, one of Hamas's most senior leaders and a key figure in ceasefire negotiations. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel addressing the world today, but making no mention of the thing that the world is talking about, not saying whether Israel had any role in that assassination. Israel did take credit for another strike just hours earlier that they said killed a top Hezbollah commander in Beirut. With all of the ramifications here potentially profound, with both attacks raising concerns yet again about widening conflict in the region. Matt Bradley is joining us now. Okay, so we heard from Benjamin Netanyahu. He did not mention the Tehran killing in this address. What are we supposed to read into regarding that omission, and what did he say?
Yeah, I mean, well, he didn't mention that Tehran attack, and, you know, it sounds as though what he did was they're not, you know, confirming or denying it. This isn't entirely unusual because in the past, there's been a lot of targeted strikes. Remember, back in the day, they used to kind of, with some regularity, Hallie, strike a lot of these nuclear scientists, and this was happening every once in a while. Nuclear scientists, activists who were against the Israelis, they would strike in Syria, some power plants and other facilities that were making munitions, and they would not confirm or deny it. Now, why did they confirm? Why did they announce that they had struck Hezbollah here in Lebanon, where I am right now, just yesterday? Well, that was a little bit different because they had more of a constituency to answer to. They had more of an immediate response. They were talking about the attack on that soccer field over the weekend that killed 12 children and teenagers. But, you know, I don't have an answer for you, Hallie. I don't know why he wasn't addressing those in particular. But when it comes to strikes within Iran, they typically don't do that. And so he did, in his speech, go through a long list of all of the targets that they had been striking. And each one of those are Iran-backed groups. So when we're talking about Iran and their so-called axis of resistance, they've been acting in concert for the first time really ever since October 7th. Now Netanyahu seems to be attacking them, you know, in succession, one after another. And that really is very threatening because it makes it seem as though this whole thing is going to come to a head with a fight between Iran and Israel.
And that is the thing that the world fears. Matt, we mentioned that this Hamas leader, more political than military, and was involved in the negotiations for a potential ceasefire. So where does that stand? It seems like there is some concern now from, for example, hostage families about the possibility that this thing falls apart.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the hostage families, we've heard from them, they sound like they think that the negotiations have been kneecapped by this move. That's not an unreasonable opinion, because the fact is that, as you mentioned, Ismail Haniyeh, he was a main sort of interlocutor, a main diplomat when it came to Hamas and its dealings abroad. We saw that he was dealing with the Iranians when he was killed. He was attending the inauguration of the new president. He's an outward-looking Hamas figure, and without him, he was considered something of a moderate by Hamas standards. This is an extremist group, but he was considered a moderate within the group, particularly when you compare him to some of the officials who are in the Gaza Strip right now. So this really does put those negotiations on the skids. But the fact is, Hallie, as I mentioned before, those negotiations were all but dead anyway.
Matt Bradley, we're glad to have you there, Matt, live for us in Beirut tonight. Thank you for keeping an eye on all of it. Let's bring you back here to home, because there's some economic news tonight. The head of the Fed dropping some tea leaves that an interest rate cut could be on the table as soon as September. But for now, the Fed is keeping rates steady. So steady as she goes as they work to rein in inflation. The markets seem to like it. The Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&P, all with a little pep in their step after today's news, although they were already having a pretty solid day. NBC's Brian Chung is breaking this all down for us. Okay, what's with this decision here, and is it good news if you're looking for, like, let's say, a lower mortgage rate, et cetera?
Yeah, this is my favorite story, because the story is that nothing happened, but that's exactly what was expected, right?
No, that's like the story, but the story is what's under the story, which is like the little signals in Fed speak, right?
Exactly, and this is the best part about covering the Fed, is you kind of get at these little words, and the little words that we got from Fed Chair Jay Powell is that September interest rate cut that markets were expecting could likely happen. So the Federal Reserve was saying it's been encouraged by inflation readings that, again, has kind of told this whole story that all of us Americans have been feeling at the store, which is higher price tags, right? But with inflation having come down to about 2.5% as of a reading on one measure of inflation, that's the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, well, the Fed has been encouraged by that number. So yes, they've been holding interest rates at that 5.25% to a 5.5% range. That's at near multi-decade highs. But the Federal Reserve saying, well, with that encouraging inflation number, we might be able to cut interest rates soon. That could lead to marginally lower interest rates on your mortgages and also on your auto loans. But again, that might not happen until the Fed actually cuts, which again markets are expecting in September, Hallie.
Well, you talk about September. That's obviously the fall of a presidential campaign year, significant there. And Jay Powell said today he knows that is part of the overlay here, right?
Yeah, so look, when it comes to politics, there's always the calendar that might not work in the favor of the optics here. But yes, if the Fed does cut in September, that would be right before the election. And what the Fed has said is, look, we do not answer to Congress. We do not answer to the president. We are doing what we need to do to make sure that we're steering this economy in the right direction. And he did address the issue of independence in the press conference. Take a listen.
We don't change anything in our approach to address other factors like the political calendar. We never use our tools to support or oppose a political party, a politician, or any political outcome.
So a short translation there, if they do cut in September, has nothing to do with politics. It's because the economy needs it, and it needs it then, Hallie.
Brian Chung, glad to have you. Thank you very much for that. Boeing is out with some split-screen news today. On the one hand, naming a new CEO. On the other hand, announcing record losses. You've got industry veteran Robert Kelly Ortberg, who's set to replace the outgoing CEO, David Calhoun, next week, with Boeing hoping to stop the bleeding, so to speak, after reporting a loss of nearly $1.5 billion in the second quarter. Calhoun's stepping down after a not-so-great year so far for Boeing, starting in January when the door blew off that Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 plane. And Boeing's Starliner spaceship is still docked to the space station, with its astronauts unable to return to Earth for well over a month after engine thruster problems. Tom Costello is joining us now. New CEO.
Yeah.
Is this enough? Is this going to turn Boeing's fortunes around?
He's got a tough job. There's no doubt about it. Every single unit of Boeing has struggled, right? So commercial airlines with the MAX 8 and the MAX 9. 2 fatal MAX 8 crashes overseas. The MAX 9 door plug blowout. By the way, NTSB hearings next week on that. Look at the space division, as you suggested. The Starliner still docked to the space station. Don't say stuck, says NASA. Astronauts could, in an emergency, return home. But I got to say, you've been there 6 weeks and you can't get home? Really, for now? You call it what you want, but they can't get out of there right now. And we're still waiting for NASA and Boeing to give us any sort of a timeline for when they could return. And NASA is, Boeing is billions of dollars over budget on that division. And then, can I tell you, military also struggling within Boeing. They've got troubles across the board. The CEO, this new CEO, has a very big job ahead of him.
So what's first on the list?
First of all, he is moving the headquarters, moving back to Seattle from right across the river, right now in Arlington. They moved the headquarters here to Washington a number of years ago because they wanted to cater to the military. The Pentagon's right here. But by doing that, the argument is they took the eye off the ball, and the ball is, of course, commercial airlines. That's the bread and butter. And engineering, they lost focus on engineering, so the argument goes. He is, by the way, a veteran aerospace engineer, 35 years in the business. So he is bringing all of the headquarters operations, at least in relation to commercial aircraft, back to Seattle. Something else that's interesting, he's 64 years old. Boeing has a mandatory retirement age of 65. The board is waiving that.
Okay,
They've decided,
including for its top leaders.
We need this guy. He's the guy. He comes from Rockwell International, and we are going to waive that mandatory retirement age. So that's going to be the challenge, right? He's got to do a lot of work and regain the confidence of you, of me, and of airlines, which are their real customers.
Not to totally derail this, but can you go back to the space station situation thing for a second? I thought the whole thing was that they're there. They could get back if they wanted to, but they're giving themselves some more time to see if they can fix this engine thruster issue while they're up there.
Yeah.
Is that still the operative thinking?
That is still the thinking.
Okay.
You know, back 6 weeks ago...
Because you sounded skeptical,
Well,
Tom.
here's
More
the problem. 6 to 7 weeks ago, Boeing and NASA said, don't call them stuck.
Yeah.
Because in an emergency, they could come home, and they'll probably be coming home in a couple of weeks. Okay, they were supposed to be there for, what, 9, 10 days? They've been there 50-plus days. And we're still waiting for them to do a full, thorough analysis of all the thruster issues before they say, okay, it's safe to come back in that spaceship. At a certain point, you got to say, if they're not stuck, what are you calling it here? I mean, a delayed stay with a room with a view, but we're not stuck? I mean, come on. At a certain point, they got to get this spaceship back safely.
Hell of a view in that room, to be sure. But
That's right.
more,
And by
more
the
on that
way,
to come, I'm sure.
still wearing other people's underwear.
Okay. Thank you, Tom Costello. Okay. We're going to move on to other news as well tonight, Tom. We sure are. Coming up next, what caused a big explosion in Florida, where some people were just trying to get their laundry done. Plus, a countrywide strike in Bolivia, why workers there say enough is enough. Next. To a new twist now in Georgia's longest-running criminal trial. Defense attorneys for young thug saying they've learned of yet another secret meeting between the former judge and prosecutors in the case. Remember, that's after some dramatic scenes in court weeks ago when the defense found out about a different secret meeting the first time around, they say. You're looking at some of those moments that went viral when young thug's lawyer was ordered to spend weekends in jail for contempt. That judge, originally assigned to the case, ended up removed altogether. But now the defense team wants a mistrial, calling the case, in their words, irrevocably tainted. Young thug, real name Jeffrey Williams, is facing charges he led an Atlanta-based criminal gang and oversaw a conspiracy to commit murder, armed robbery, and deal drugs. Priya Sridhar is following this one for us. Okay, Priya, so what are the chances, based on your reporting, that the defense gets the mistrial it wants after revealing what they describe as this secret meeting between the judge who used to oversee this case and prosecutors?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the question that legal observers who have been absolutely captivated by this case are debating right now. What we know so far is Judge Paige Whitaker, the new judge who has sort of taken Judge Glanville's role in this case, she has denied all the motions that have been brought forward so far that she's gotten a chance to see any sort of mistrial. This one, however, seems to have the most meat to it because it seems to indicate a pattern here that the judge was having these secret meetings with prosecutors, and now defense attorneys are bringing up, hey, listen, the first time that first secret meeting that was conducted on June 10th was brought up, we talked about this at length. Why was it never brought up in those discussions that there was now another secret meeting that happened on June 7th? So essentially what defense attorneys are trying to say right now is that everything that Judge Glanville ruled on and all the decisions he made in the 19 months prior to him being recused from this case should be called into question. And not just that, when the first secret secret meeting was revealed by the defense attorney, Brian Steele, that the case should have been put on pause at that point, and that Judge Glanville actually decided not to do that, not to wait for the other judge to come in and decide whether or not he was in fact going to be recused. But he continued to allow the jury to listen to witness testimony for 4 days. So now defense attorneys are saying, listen, that's tainted testimony. So, you know, there's a really high bar when it comes to a judge declaring a mistrial here. But as you mentioned, this has been absolutely an unprecedented case. So anything is really possible here, Hallie.
Did the installation of this new judge slow down the trial more? Like, in other words, what's the timeline here, as this is already Georgia's longest running criminal trial?
Yeah, I think that's another question that everybody's kind of watching. She seemed to indicate, at least so far this week, when the trial has picked back up, that she wants to move very quickly. She says she's hoping it's not going to take another 7 months, but she's prepared if it does. The prosecutors have another 105 witnesses that they want to call to the stand, but Judge Whitaker has moved rather swiftly this week, making two big decisions. One was to not allow Young Thug to actually bond out of jail. His defense attorneys were trying to argue that, listen, he's been behind bars since May of 2022, and a lot of the delays and pauses in this case had nothing to do with him. He's not a flight risk. He's not a risk to the community. But Judge Whitaker actually denied that request to bond out. She also denied the prosecution's request to put a gag order on the defense attorneys and not allow them to speak publicly or to the media about this case. So if you look at just those two decisions, which she moved rather swiftly on, everyone's hoping that perhaps this case can be wrapped up kind of quickly. But as you mentioned, it's already set records for being the longest trial in Georgia's history, Hallie.
Priya Sridhar live for us there in Georgia. Thank you very much. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, rescuers in India searching for people after those landslides we've told you about. Landslides that have killed more than 150, according to officials. Look at all the mud there. Crews are pulling out people who are stuck, but that rain you see falling, that's making it harder. Officials say more than 5,500 people have been rescued so far. Number 2, 2 former Penn State students pleading guilty to misdemeanor hazing after a pledge at their fraternity died. The 2 former students were the president and vice president of the chapter back in 2017 when this pledge apparently drank a lot, fell, and then died. They'll be sentenced in October. Their lawyers did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Number 3, 4 people were hurt after an explosion at a laundromat in Florida. Look at this. That's the parking lot covered in sheets of metal and shattered glass. Seems like the roof of the building was also damaged. 2 people had to be hospitalized but are expected to be okay. Number 4, that Boar's Head recall is now expanding to include 7 million more pounds of deli meat and some other food over concerns about listeria. You can see some of what's been recalled here on screen. 2 people have died. More than 30 people across several states have gotten sick, according to health officials. Number 5, a nice boat ride in Florida taking a turn for the worse when a woman realized her dog was not on board. That's because Ellie was in the water. There she is, the Australian cattle dog. The captain of a tour boat spotted Ellie, and after a day, she was reunited with her owner. That is amazing to see. To tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight, it's those popular weight loss drugs we've been covering, like Ozempic and Mounjaro. Studies showing these revolutionary medications can have dramatic benefits. But doctors are also reporting some patients developing eating disorders or seeing them get worse when using the drugs. Here's Dr. Akshay Sayal.
Cynthia Landau has always had a complicated relationship with food. Fighting obesity since she was a kid, she was eventually diagnosed with binge eating disorder.
For me, it was obsessing about my next meal, obsessing about when my next snack is going to be. I was always thinking about food. It was like just continuous thoughts about it.
Struggling to lose weight, her doctor recommended a GLP-1 drug, part of a new class of medications used for weight loss, now soaring in popularity after being touted by celebrities like Oprah.
The superstar admitting she uses a weight loss medication.
But what happened next shocked Cynthia.
Completely changed the way I looked at food, how I felt, how I was thinking, like completely. Like for the binge eating, it like almost completely took it away.
She began skipping meals, eating as little as 500 calories a day with dangerous consequences.
I did experience like my blood sugar levels drop because I wasn't eating enough and I wasn't eating frequently enough. First time that I fainted, I was on the subway. It became more important to maintain that weight loss and to continue losing weight over fueling my body.
Doctors say Cynthia is part of an emerging trend of patients who have developed eating disorders or seen them worsen since starting the medications, which include drugs like Wegovy, or Zepbound.
Particularly in the last 6 months, we've just seen an increase of new onset eating disorders or worsening of current eating disorders based off of the use of these drugs.
Dr. Thomas Hildebrandt, chief of the Eating and Weight Disorders program at Mount Sinai School of Medicine, says he's seen patients develop eating disorders just a few months after starting the drugs.
Their relationship with food then became more obsessive. Their relationship with their weight and their body also became obsessive. You start to turn into someone not like yourself.
When taking GLP-1 weight loss drugs, it's normal to have less of an appetite. This leads patients to eat less and ultimately leads to weight loss. But sometimes it can go too far.
So how do you know if patients eating less is part of a normal reaction to a drug or it crosses a line into an eating disorder?
I think there are a couple of signs. One, if you're unable to eat enough to actually maintain your nutrition. The other kinds of symptoms that we see a preoccupation with the number on the scale, the progress I'm making, and weight loss that doesn't ever really stop.
Major eating disorder organizations are now calling for doctors to screen people for conditions such as anorexia or bulimia before prescribing these drugs. In a statement, Wegovy's maker Novo Nordisk said their medications should only be taken as prescribed and trust that healthcare providers are evaluating a patient's individual needs. And Zepbound maker Eli Lilly said they actively engage in monitoring, evaluating, and reporting safety information. And if somebody is experiencing any side effects, they encourage them to speak with their healthcare provider. Cynthia is now working closely with a psychologist who has helped her get back to a healthy diet and weight. She's still taking the drug to maintain her weight, but doesn't use it as often.
I wish I would have been better prepared for the side effects that my mental health had, but I appreciated the medication has helped me reach my weight loss goals. Ultimately, I'm grateful.
Dr. Hildebrandt said that part of the problem is the lack of education and screening by doctors to find those who might be at risk of an eating disorder. For those on these drugs or looking to start them and worried you might be at risk, he recommends you talk to a mental health professional. Hallie?
Dr. Sayal, thank you very much. Still to come, a lot more here on the show, including beyond the medals and the world records at the Paris Olympics. We'll talk about how geopolitical tensions are getting into the mix, too, especially when it comes to those Chinese swimmers. Plus, even more wildfires burning out of control, this time in Europe. We'll tell you what's making these so hard to fight in a sec. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's a look at what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of North Macedonia, firefighters are battling huge wildfires there for the third day in a row. At least one person has died. Dozens of homes have burned down. There's a lot of wind, and that's creating very tough conditions in the area for this thing to be put out. 66 wildfires have erupted in just over the past 24 hours there, with many now burning out of control. To Bolivia now, where there's a big fuel shortage tonight. Look at these rows and rows of cars waiting in line for gas. Bolivia imports about half its gasoline. This whole thing was mostly caused after this key shipment of diesel supplies from Russia did not come through. Transport unions starting a national strike today to protest the shortages. And out of China, a couple pandas looking like they're getting in on all the Olympics fun, showing off their gymnastic skills. Strength on the rings there, I guess. All this equipment is supposed to help the giant pandas enhance their behavior and their quality of life. We'll just roll the panda cam. You know, we'll take an hour of that. It's good stuff. Taking you to Paris now. And Team USA's swimming superstar Katie Ledecky making history with her win in the 1500, setting a new Olympic record. She crushed. She dominated. So here she is. And if you're like, wait, I don't see swimmers in the other lanes around her, that's because they were so far back. She looked like she was swimming by herself at some points. This is her 8th gold, tying a record for U.S. women. And in the water as well, over in the Seine, the triathlon. Those triathletes finally swimming after the water was declared safe. Guess who's live in Paris for us? Who else would it be? Our boy, Keir Simmons. There is a lot of swimming talk tonight, Keir. Not yours, but yes, Katie Ledecky's. She's amazing. Yes. And what's interesting is even, 27 years old, very young for, like, humans. On the older end, for Olympic swimmers, she's killing it.
On the older end? The older. I think someone wrote that.
That's not me. I said she was young for humans.
Did someone write that to humiliate me? Are we starting this straight? Right out the gate. 27. I mean, yeah, but they're 27, and that is, you're right, that is older for an Olympian. And also, by the way, just try swimming one lap of a pool.
No thanks.
Freestyle.
Not me, babe.
And see, I tell you, right? And that's 15 minutes. I mean, it's like it's lung crushing. It's muscle depleting. It is unbelievable to see her. I thought at one stage that Katie Ledecky might start lapping the other competitors. I mean, she was so far ahead. It was ridiculous. So, yeah, I mean, an amazing moment for her. And I think we have a graphic. She is close to being the most medals against other Team USA women. I think we have that graphic. So, you know, that is going to be quite an achievement. And you know, okay, she's 27, but she's really just getting started. Simone Biles and the women gymnasts call themselves the Golden Girls. So, yeah, you're right. You're right to make the reference in terms of how amazing it is at this point in their careers. They call themselves something else as well, but we can't say it
we can.
On air.
They said their other team name, you're talking about the USA women's gymnastics team, they said their other team name was F Around and Find Out. I didn't say what the F stands for, but that's what they said until Simone Biles came out and said Golden Girls. We can say it.
You went there. Okay.
It's streaming here. We can say it.
I'm not saying it.
All right, on the Sen front, we've been talking about the Sen a bunch, right? Because they were going to swim.
I know what happens. You see that moment ends up on Twitter, and then I get a call from manager. It's a thing.
Let's talk about one of our favorite topics, which is the Sen River, which you took a dip in one of the tributaries. It is finally opening back up as of today. So we saw the triathletes actually swimming in it. Did you get any vibes that they were nervous at all about it? Or this is kind of par for the course for these athletes who do swim in open water. That's part of the competition, as you've explained on the show.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think they saw me swim and felt kind of embarrassed and better get on with it. Overnight they tested the water, the bacteria, despite there were thunderstorms here overnight too. Despite that, the water level, the bacteria levels were low enough, and there they are swimming under the Alexander III Bridge and looking exhausted at moments there. But what an amazing place to see them. You know, what a historic place. You know, you look back at those black and white pictures of Olympics past. Yeah. Those pictures we will look at in 100 years' time and say, wow, look at that, how about that?
Incredible.
So I'm so glad that happened that way. And a gold medal for Paris, which, of course, has spent $1.5 billion. So, you know, they've invested a little bit.
Your daily question of the evening where you are. What's your favorite moment today? What's the thing you did that you love the most today? What's your rose?
Good. Yeah, you prepared me yesterday, and I didn't prepare all day.
24 hours to think about this.
I know.
All right. Well,
I think Ledecky. Honestly, I really do. I think Ledecky. We did see, by the way, we did see South Sudan in the basketball against Team USA, and they did lose. But it's pretty incredible to see a group of refugees, none of whom actually live in the country, go toe-to-toe with Team USA in the basketball. LeBron James. How about that?
No, that's another great moment. Keir Simmons, I'm just telling you now, we're going to talk every day, and every day I'm going to ask you that question. So just, we'll rose and thorn it out. It'll be good. Keir Simmons, appreciate you. You're my rose of the day. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it.
Oh, bless you.
Let's take you to China, where some of the Olympic swimmers there competing for that country say they're not really thrilled with how they've been treated. They're saying they're getting tested more than any of the other athletes, all stemming from this doping controversy going back to the games from 2020 that were played in 2021, where 23 Chinese swimmers tested positive. One of those swimmers, you see there, Zhang Yufi, competing in the 200-meter fly today, coming first place in her heat. But this whole thing is really adding to some of the tensions between the U.S. and China. You've got this group of U.S. lawmakers furious over how that 2021 case was handled. So mad that they've introduced a bill that could cut funding for the global sports anti-doping system unless there are some changes. World anti-doping officials say they're being unfairly caught in the middle of what they describe as geopolitical tensions between superpowers. Janice Mackey-Freyer joins us now from Beijing. And this is part of what is so interesting about the Olympics, Janice. It is fun. It is this incredible competition showcasing the world's greatest athletes. But there are also geopolitical dynamics at play. And we're seeing that here with this Chinese doping scandal. Talk us through it.
Hallie, you're exactly right. This cloud of suspicion over Chinese swimmers is the doping scandal of this Games because it's exposing what appears to be a chronic lack of faith that many U.S. athletes have in the system that's supposed to ensure clean and fair competition. And then you have Chinese swimmers like Zhang Yufei, who are saying they're being unfairly treated, that they're being psychologically impacted, that Chinese swimmers are being bypassed in the congratulations during medal ceremonies by other athletes, that it's disrupting the spirit of the Games. And they are being tested more than other athletes, Hallie. World Aquatics officials confirm that on average, since the 1st of January, Chinese swimmers have been tested 21 times by various anti-doping organizations. You compare that with American swimmers at 6 times on average and Australian swimmers at 4 times. But you also have U.S. anti-doping authorities and U.S. athletes livid about what's happening. Michael Phelps testified recently to a congressional committee. Here's what he had to say.
I think if we continue to let this slide any farther, the Olympic Games might not even be there.
And then you have Allison Schmidt, who was also testifying to that committee. She was one of the swimmers who lost out on gold in Tokyo to some of the Chinese swimmers who are now caught up in this scandal. Hallie.
What about any response from Chinese leaders on this, from Olympics officials on this? Because, as you know, it is really sort of roiling this community.
Well, we submitted some questions to China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They told us, quote, Chinese swimmers are clean and have never feared testing. They also say the allegation, quote, smears and attacks China and international anti-doping institutions and interferes with the global anti-doping governance system. China strongly condemns this. This is all over Chinese social media, Hallie. This is a huge topic. People saying that Chinese athletes just aren't performing as well at this Olympic Games because of all of the pressure. They're using comments like being targeted, that it's discrimination, that it's psychological and physical torment.
Janice Mackey-Frere, we're glad to have you there covering all of it for us. I'm sure we'll be talking again before the end of these games. Thank you. Coming up here on the show, some stunning new claims about the way Israel is treating Palestinians in their custody. What one former detainee is telling NBC News in a new exclusive interview. Tonight, a report out from the UN is making new claims about the way Israel, they say, treats its Palestinian detainees. This report from the UN's Human Rights Office, based on interviews with former detainees, describes allegations of severe torture, including reports of being held in cage-like facilities, waterboarding, sleep, food, and water deprivation, electric shocks, setting dogs on prisoners, getting stripped naked, and some other forms of mistreatment. The Israeli military, responding to this report, said abuse of detainees is illegal and against military orders, and that investigations are launched into all detainee deaths in custody. Now, in a new NBC News exclusive, a former Palestinian detainee is detailing their account in line with the UN's findings. NBC's Hallie Garani has the story, and we want to warn you, some of what you're going to hear is disturbing.
On July 9th, Muazzez Zobayat walked out of an Israeli prison a broken man. In fact, he could barely walk at all. His legs shattered, his right arm fractured, confused and emaciated. Once a fit 200-pound amateur bodybuilder, the 39-year-old father of 5 tells us he was relentlessly tortured in Nakab prison in the Negev desert. They stripped me and began to beat me while I was naked, he told me in an exclusive interview from his home in Bethlehem in the West Bank. They even hit me on the genital organs, he said. And the people with you as well, I ask? Yes, they used to beat all the prisoners. And even when they handcuffed us, they used to make us sit on the ground like animals, he says. Israeli intelligence services Shin Bet did not respond to our request to respond to Obayat's account. But it is this type of alleged abuse by guards at another desert prison that led far-right Israeli protesters to break into the Sededi Temam detention camp Monday. Not to protest suspected prisoner abuse, but to try to stop the Israeli police from arresting and questioning 9 guards suspected of torturing detainees. They were accompanied by several far-right members of the Israeli parliament, screaming death to terrorists. Since the October 7th attacks, NBC News has interviewed former detainees both in Gaza and the West Bank, who give largely similar accounts of severe mistreatment in detention. Like this group of prisoners released July 25th. Some unable to walk, others suffering from amnesia and broken bones, according to their relatives. The IDF has told NBC News they treat detainees according to international law. Human rights groups like HRW dispute that and say the arrests and abuses have increased since October 7th.
Under international humanitarian law, the ICRC, the Red Cross, has the main mandate to monitor detention facilities, and there has been absolutely no visits. So there's complete isolation and no awareness to what's exactly happening in these detention conditions, except when whistleblowers speak to journalists, speak to media, and are able to really give us a sense of what's going on.
Muazzez Obayat told us Israeli forces called him a killer, something he denies. He said he was interrogated only once in 9 months. No charges were ever filed. Obayat was held under so-called administrative detention, where Palestinian prisoners can be detained without charge and without any evidence against them. Your family didn't know your whereabouts at the time. What was happening to you, I asked? I was isolated from the world, he responded. Negev prison is the worst torture prison known in history. We, the prisoners, named it Guantanamo. His fifth child, a son, was born while he was held in captivity. Obayat says he now carries the prison within him, and that even though he's home, he's not entirely free. Hala Gorani, NBC News, Bethlehem.
When we come back, it is possible that you or somebody you know uses StubHub for concert tickets. We'll tell you why it's now getting sued for the way it does business. StubHub tonight, now at the center of a new lawsuit that accuses the company of deceptive pricing and hidden fees. You know StubHub. You probably used them to buy concert tickets or sports tickets. Maybe you've sold tickets on there. Well, this lawsuit filed by the D.C. Attorney General now accuses the company of something called drip pricing, meaning posting like a price that's not complete, adding a bunch of fees during this long checkout process, using that little countdown clock to make it all feel really urgent. And ultimately, they say, boosting profits at the expense of customers by the tune of something like $118 million in hidden fees since 2015, according to the lawsuit. In a statement, StubHub's responding, saying they're committed to creating a transparent, secure, and competitive marketplace to benefit consumers, adding that their user experience is consistent with the law and with competitors' practices. Danny Savalos is joining us now. So, Danny, the lawsuit lays out this example. We're showing it here. 2 tickets listed at $178 each. By the time the person gets to the screen where they actually pay, they're hit with $141 in fees, which boosts the ticket price, obviously, by quite a bit. What does the lawsuit say about how StubHub, the accusation goes, tricks customers into paying this stuff?
Well, the complaint itself introduces us to the term drip pricing, but it also uses a term we're very familiar with, the bait and the switch. And they put those 2 words in bold, and everyone's familiar with that practice. And that's exactly what the AG, the plaintiffs in this case, are alleging, that StubHub does a bait and switch. They advertise one price. By the time you get to the end and it's time to buy, you are now at another price. And they're taking advantage of what not only D.C. has, but many states have, which is very broadly drafted consumer protection laws. Some of these broadly prohibit any unfair or deceptive trade practice. That's a very big tent. So a creative attorney general or a creative private plaintiff can bring suit, and if their theory fits, then the company might be on the hook under these very permissive statutes.
This is the latest in a string of lawsuits against ticketing companies, and it's not even the first lawsuit this year for StubHub, right?
Yes, but StubHub's also, and some of these companies have been sued for antitrust. That's a lot different. That's about monopolistic practices.
Got it.
That's about cartel-type behavior, creating an artificial demand that doesn't exist because of monopolistic practices. This is a little different. This is like deceptive advertising, where they're telling us one price and giving us another at the end. So different theories, but still very much, you are correct. These companies are very much under attack lately.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.